The night sky over Kansas split open with fire. Thomas Mercer stood on his back porch, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. He had not been sleeping well lately. 3 years since Maria died, and still the bed felt too big, the house too quiet. His boy Danny was asleep upstairs, dreaming whatever dreams 7-year-old boys dream. Thomas watched the stars and thought about nothing in particular. Then the burning thing screamed across the heavens. It was not a meteor. Thomas had seen plenty of those in his 42 years on this farm. Meteors did not curve. Meteors did not trail black smoke. Meteors did not make sounds like a wounded animal crying out in pain. The object struck his wheat field half a mile from the house. The impact shook the ground beneath his boots. A column of fire rose into the night, and Thomas could see the silhouette of his old oak tree against the flames. He did not think. He grabbed his flashlight from the hook by the door and his hunting rifle from the cabinet. Not because he planned to shoot anything, but because his father had taught him that a man does not walk toward fire unarmed. He did not know what he would find. He only knew he had to go. The wheat was burning in a wide circle around the crash. Thomas pushed through the smoke and the heat, covering his mouth with his sleeve. The object had carved a long scar through his field before coming to rest against the oak tree. His grandfather had planted that tree. It was still standing, though barely. The object was not a meteor. It was a machine of some kind. A vessel. A vessel. Parts of it glowed with colors Thomas had no names for. Strange symbols covered its surface, now cracked and melting. The door on the side had been torn open by the impact. Thomas approached slowly. His heart beat so hard he could hear it in his ears. Inside the vessel, something moved. He raised his flashlight and looked through the broken door. What he saw would stay with him for the rest of his life. There were 2 creatures inside. They were tall and covered in scales that shimmered like oil on water. Their faces were long and narrow, with eyes like pools of melted copper. Small horns curved back from their skulls. They had claws instead of fingernails and what looked like folded wings on their backs. They looked like dragons from the old stories, but smaller, more delicate. The larger one was dying. Thomas could see that immediately. A piece of the ship had broken off and gone through her body. She was pinned to the floor, and the blood pooling beneath her glowed faintly, like liquid light. She had thrown herself over the smaller creature, shielding it with her own body. The smaller one was a child. Thomas was a father. He knew what children looked like, even children with scales and copper eyes. This one was hurt too, but alive. Her scales were violet, her eyes wide with terror, her small wings torn and hanging limp. A device on the dying creature's wrist crackled with static. Then it spoke in broken English, each word coming slow and painful. "Please," the creature said. Her voice was like wind through relay leaves. "My daughter. She's all that remains of my house. Please." Thomas Mercer had held his wife as she died. Cancer had taken her slowly, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but love and pain. He knew what it meant to watch the light leave someone's eyes. He knew what it meant to feel helpless against the darkness. He climbed into the broken vessel. The heat was intense, and the smoke made his eyes water. He knelt beside the dying creature and took her clawed hand in his own. Her skin was cool and dry, like snakeskin. "I am Thomas," he said. "You are on my land. You are safe here." The creature's copper eyes found his face. She studied him for a long moment. Whatever she was looking for, she seemed to find it. "Thalsira," she said. "I am Thalsira. My daughter is Nixon. We were not supposed to come here. We were only watching, observing. But something went wrong. The ship, the systems." Her grip tightened on his hand. Blood bubbled at the corner of her mouth. "I cannot save myself," Thalsira whispered. "But you can save her, please. Promise me. Promise me you will keep her safe." Thomas looked at the child called Nixon. She had not moved or spoken. She only stared at him with those huge copper eyes, shaking, clutching something small and broken against her chest. A toy of some kind. Even now, even dying. She held onto her toy. He thought about Danny. He thought about what he would want someone to do. If Danny was alone and afraid on a strange world with no one to protect him. "I promise," Thomas said. "I will look after her. I swear it on my wife's grave." Thalsira closed her eyes. Something like peace crossed her alien face. "Thank you," she breathed. "Thank you, Thomas of Earth. You are kind. Your people are supposed to be primitive, violent. We were told you were barely sentient. But you are kind." Her hand went limp as Thomas stayed there for a moment, holding the hand of a creature from another world, a mother who had died protecting her child. Then he gently released her and turned to Nixon. "Come on," he said softly. "I am going to take you somewhere safe." The child did not move. She looked at her mother's still form, then back at Thomas. She did not understand his words, not really. But she understood his tone. She understood his open hand. Slowly, carefully, Nixon reached out and took it. Thomas lifted her out of the wreckage. She weighed almost nothing. Her scales were smooth against his arms, and she smelled like ozone and something sweet he could not name. She buried her face against his shoulder and made a sound that needed no translation. She was crying. Behind them, the ship began to burn in earnest. Thomas carried Nixon away from the fire, through the ruined wheat, toward the farmhouse where his son still slept. With each step, he wondered what he had just promised. With each step, he knew it did not matter. He had made an oath to a dying mother. That was all he needed to know. The porch light was on when he reached the house. Danny stood in the doorway in his pajamas, his eyes wide as dinner plates. "Dad?" The boy whispered. "What is that?" Thomas looked down at the alien child in his arms, still clutching her broken toy, still weeping against his chest. "This is Nixon," he said. "She's going to be staying with us for a while. Her mother had to go somewhere she cannot follow. She's very sad and very scared. So we are going to be kind to her, okay?" Danny stared at the dragon child. Then he nodded slowly. "Okay, Dad." Thomas carried Nixon inside and closed the door against the burning night. Nixon did not speak for the first week. Thomas gave her the guest room at the end of the hall. It had been Maria's sewing room once, but he had cleared it out after she died because looking at her unfinished projects hurt too much. Now it held a small bed, a dresser, and an alien child who would not eat, would not talk, would not do anything except sit by the window and stare at the sky. The translator device on her wrist still worked, though it crackled and sparked sometimes. Thomas tried to talk to her through it. He told her she was safe. He told her she could stay as long as she needed. He told her about Earth, about Kansas, about the farm. She listened but never responded. She just held that broken toy against her chest and watched the clouds. Danny watched her from doorways. He was curious but also afraid. He had never seen anything like her before. Her scales changed color slightly depending on the light. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dark. Sometimes, late at night, Thomas heard strange sounds from her room. Not crying exactly, but something close. Something that made his heart ache. He buried Thalsira in the field, near the oak tree that had survived the crash. He did not know what kind of ceremony her people performed for their dead, so he said a simple prayer and marked the grave with a stone. It felt like the right thing to do. He hoped she would have approved. The government came on the third day. Black cars and serious men in dark suits. They asked questions Thomas did not know how to answer. They wanted to take Nixon away for study. Thomas stood on his porch with his rifle and told them to leave. He had made a promise to a dying mother, and he would keep it. The men argued, threatened, made phone calls. In the end, they left without the child. Thomas suspected they would be back, but for now, she was safe. Nixon began eating on the 5th day. Small amounts at first. She could not digest everything humans ate, but she seemed to like fruit and cooked vegetables. She would not touch meat. Thomas learned to make simple meals she could manage. It was not much, but it was something. On the 8th night, everything changed. Thomas woke to the sound of the back door closing. He got out of bed and went to check on Danny, but Danny's room was empty. So was Nixon's. Thomas felt his heart jump. He grabbed his flashlight and went outside. He found them in the barn. Danny had followed Nixon there. The boy sat in the doorway, watching, not sure what to do. Nixon was in the corner, surrounded by pieces of her broken toy. She was trying to put it back together. Her claws shook as she worked. The pieces kept falling apart. The toy had been completely destroyed in the crash. Its delicate limbs were bent and snapped. Its body was cracked open. Something inside it that had once glowed was now dark and dead. Thomas watched from the shadows. He did not want to interrupt. Nixon placed two pieces together. They fell apart. She tried again. They fell apart again. She kept trying over and over, as if enough effort could undo what the crash had done. Finally, the largest piece slipped from her claws and shattered against the floor. Nixon made a sound. It was high and thin and broken. It was the sound of a child whose world had ended. It was the sound of grief, too big for her small body to hold. Danny stood up. Thomas almost called out to stop him, but something held his tongue. He watched his son walk across the barn and sit down across from the alien girl. Nixon looked up. Her copper eyes were wet. Her tears glowed faintly in the dark, like tiny stars running down her face. Danny did not say anything at first. He just sat there with her. Two children in the dark, surrounded by broken things. Then Danny spoke. "My mom died," he said quietly. 2 years ago. 3 years ago. I forget sometimes. It feels like forever. It feels like yesterday. Nixon watched him. She did not understand all his words, but she understood his voice. Soft, sad, kind. "I wanted to throw everything away after she died," Danny continued. "All her stuff. Her books and her clothes and her pictures. Because looking at them hurt too much. Because they reminded me she was gone." He picked up one of the broken pieces of Nixon's toy. He turned it over in his small hands. "But my dad said no. He said we had to keep them. He said damaged things merit attention. That is what he told me. He said broken stuff matters more, not less. Because it needs you. Because it remembers what it used to be." Nixon's tears kept falling. But she was listening now. Really listening. "Your toy is broken," Danny said. "But that does not mean it is gone. It just means it needs help. It needs someone to pay attention to it. To fix it. To love it even though it is not perfect anymore." He held out his hand. "Can I see it? Maybe we can fix it together." Nixon did not move for a long moment. She looked at the broken pieces around her. She looked at Danny's open hand. She looked at his face, this strange little creature with no scales and no claws and no wings, who had come to sit with her in the dark. Slowly, carefully, she gathered the pieces of her toy. She placed them in Danny's hands. Danny smiled at her. It was a small smile, a sad smile, but it was real. "My dad is really good at fixing things," he said. "He fixed our tractor when everyone said it was dead. He fixed our radio when it stopped working. He can fix anything. We will ask him to help, okay?" Nixon did not know the word okay, but she understood the meaning. She nodded. Thomas stepped back from the barn door. His eyes were wet now, too. He had not cried since Maria's funeral, but watching his son comfort this broken child from another world, watching him offer the same words Thomas had once offered him, something cracked open inside his chest. Damaged things merit attention. He had said that to Danny when the boy wanted to burn Maria's photos. He had meant it then. He meant it now. The alien girl was damaged, broken by loss and fear and a crash that had taken everything from her. But that did not mean she was beyond repair. That did not mean she did not deserve love. Thomas wiped his eyes and walked into the barn. "What have we got here?" he asked, keeping his voice gentle. Danny looked up. "Dad, can you fix Nixon's toy? She's really sad because it is broken. I told her you could fix anything." Thomas knelt down beside the children. He looked at the pieces in Danny's hands. They were strange and alien, made of materials he did not recognize. He had no idea how they fit together. He had no idea if the thing could even be repaired. But he looked at Nixon's face, wet with glowing tears, full of desperate hope. And he knew what he was going to say. "Well," Thomas said, "let us see what we can do." Nixon did not understand all his words, but she understood his smile. She understood his kindness. For the first time since the crash, she smiled back. Thomas Mercer was not an engineer. He was a farmer. He knew how to fix tractors and patch fences and keep old machines running long past their expected death. He did not know anything about alien technology. He did not know how crystalline memory cores worked or what powered the delicate mechanisms inside Nixon's toy, but he knew how to try. The toy was called a Shalveth. Nixon explained this through her broken translator, speaking slowly, choosing simple words. It was more than a toy, she said. It was a companion, a keeper of memories. Inside its crystal heart were recordings of her mother's voice, stored moments from her childhood, songs Thalsira had sung to her when she was small. The Shalveth was the last piece of her mother she had left, and it was shattered. Thomas laid out all the pieces on his workbench. There were dozens of them. Some were made of metal he did not recognize, light and strong and warm to the touch. Some were made of crystal that had once glowed but was now dark and cracked. Some were tiny gears and springs, no bigger than a grain of rice. The crash had destroyed almost everything. "I will be honest with you," Thomas told Nixon. Danny translated the words as best he could, acting things out when the translator failed. "I do not know if I can make this work again. I do not have the right tools or the right materials, but I will try my best. That is all I can promise." Nixon nodded. She understood. Trying was enough. Trying was more than anyone had ever offered her before. They worked together every night for 3 weeks. Thomas would finish his farm work as the sun went down, then head to the workshop. Danny and Nixon would be waiting for him. Danny had become Nixon's shadow, always nearby, always ready to help. The two children had formed a bond that went beyond words. They played together during the day, running through the fields, climbing the old oak tree, catching fireflies at dusk. Nixon was learning English fast, picking up words and phrases from Danny and from the television. Thomas let them watch in the evenings, but the nights belonged to the SAL _VETH. Nixon would sit on a stool beside the workbench and explain what each piece did. This was the movement core. This was the voice box. This was the memory crystal, the most important part, now cracked down the middle. Thomas listened and took notes. He drew diagrams. He tried to understand. Most of the original components were beyond repair. The alien materials were too damaged, and Thomas had no way to replace them. So he improvised. He found parts from old radios and broken clocks. He machined new joints from brass and steel. He soldered connections with steady hands and endless patience. When the original eyes were too damaged to save, Danny had an idea. "What about my LED lights?" the boy asked. He had a small collection of electronic parts, gifts from past birthdays, things he used to build simple circuits for fun. "They glow. Maybe we could use them instead." Thomas looked at the tiny LED bulbs. They were blue, not the amber color the original eyes had been. But they would work. They would glow. They would give the Shalveth sight again. "Good thinking, son," Thomas said. Danny beamed with pride. They installed the LEDs together, father and son. Nixon watched with wide copper eyes, her claws clasped in front of her, barely breathing. When Thomas connected the power source and the blue lights flickered to life, she made a small sound of wonder. The memory crystal was the hardest part. It was cracked but not completely broken. The recordings inside were still there, Nixon insisted. She could feel them. But the crystal would not play. Something inside it had been damaged by the impact. Thomas spent 4 nights just staring at the crystal, trying to figure out how it worked. He could not read the alien symbols etched into its surface. He did not understand the technology. But he noticed something. The crystal seemed to respond to heat. When he held it near a lamp, faint colors swirled inside it. When he touched it with a warm finger, it hummed almost too quietly to hear. He built a warming cradle from copper wire and an old battery. He set the crystal inside and let it heat slowly, gently, over the course of a whole night. By morning, the crystal was glowing again. Faintly, weakly, but glowing. When they placed it back inside the rebuilt Shalveth, something wonderful happened. The toy moved. It was jerky and slow, not like the smooth motions Nixon remembered. Its body was no longer sleek alien metal, but a patchwork of human parts, brass and steel and wire and plastic. Its eyes glowed blue instead of amber. Its voice, when it spoke, crackled with static, but it spoke. Thalcira's voice came from the small speaker Thomas had salvaged from an old radio. The words were in Nixon's language, sounds Thomas and Danny could not understand. But Nixon understood. She sat very still, her eyes closed, listening to her mother's voice for the first time since the crash. Thomas watched her face. He saw tears running down her scaled cheeks, going faintly in the workshop light. But these were not the tears of despair he had seen that first night in the barn. These were different. These were tears of healing. When the recording ended, Nixon opened her eyes. She looked at the rebuilt Shalveth in her hands. This strange creature that was part alien and part human. Not quite what it had been, but still alive. Still here. Still holding her mother's voice inside it. Then she looked at Thomas. Then at Danny. "Thank you," she said. Her English was still rough, but the words were clear. "Thank you, family." Danny grinned. "See, Dad? I told her you could fix anything." Thomas laughed. It was a real laugh, the first one in a long time. He put one arm around Danny and one arm around Nixon and pulled them both close. "I did not fix it alone," he said. "We all fixed it, together." Nixon leaned into the embrace. She had not been held like this since her mother died. She had forgotten how it felt. Safe, warm, loved. She was still far from home. She was still broken in ways that could not be repaired with brass and wire. But sitting in this workshop, surrounded by these strange kind, wonderful creatures who had taken her in and refused to give up on her, she felt something she had not felt since the crash. She felt like she belonged. The Shalveth sat on the workbench, its blue eyes glowing softly, holding the voice of a mother who had crossed the stars to give her daughter a chance at life. Damaged things merit attention, Danny had said. Broken stuff matters more, not less. The Mercers had proven those words true. Outside, the Kansas night was full of stars. Somewhere up there, Nixon's people were searching for her. Somewhere up there, decisions were being made that would change everything. But for now, in this moment, there was only the warmth of the workshop and the love of a family she had never expected to find. For now, that was enough. 8 months passed. Nixon grew stronger. Her English became fluent. Her torn wings healed, though they would never be strong enough to fly. She went to school with Danny, wearing long sleeves and a hood to hide her scales, pretending to be a sick child with a rare skin condition. The other children were curious, but kind. Danny stayed close to her always, ready to explain, ready to protect. She called Thomas father now. Not dad, like Danny did, but father. It was the closest word in her language to what he had become to her. He had earned the title. He had kept his promise to Thalcira. She called Danny brother. He was proud of that. He told everyone at school, though they did not understand what he really meant. Life on the farm found a new rhythm. Nixon helped with the animals. She had a gift for calming the horses, who seemed to sense something ancient and wise in her copper eyes. She learned to cook human food and taught Thomas and Danny some recipes from her world. Strange dishes made from earth ingredients that tasted like nothing they had ever experienced. The Shalveth sat on her bedside table, its blue LED eyes watching over her while she slept. Sometimes, late at night, she would activate it and listen to her mother's voice. The pain was still there, but it was softer now. More like memory than wound. She was happy. She had not expected to ever be happy again, but she was. Then the sky went dark. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Danny was at school, and Nixon had stayed home with a cold. Thomas was in the field when the shadow fell. He looked up and saw something that stopped his heart. A ship hung in the sky. It was enormous, larger than any building Thomas had ever seen, larger than his entire farm and the neighbors' farms combined. It blocked out the sun. It made no sound, but the air itself seemed to vibrate with its presence. Thomas ran to the house. Nixon was standing on the porch, staring up at the ship, her face pale beneath her violet scales. "They found me," she whispered. "My people. They found me." A beam of light descended from the ship. When it faded, 5 figures stood in Thomas's front yard. 4 of them were soldiers, tall and armored, carrying weapons that hummed with deadly energy. The 5th was different. He was older, his scales the color of dried blood, his copper eyes cold and hard. He wore robes instead of armor, decorated with symbols that Nixon seemed to recognize. "Commander Virith," she said. Her voice was steady, but Thomas could see her hands shaking. Virith looked at Thomas the way a man might look at an insect. Less than an insect. Something beneath notice. Then his gaze moved to Nixon, and his expression shifted to something like disgust. "Thalcira," he said. His translator made his words flat and mechanical. "You have been located. You will return with us to the Dominion immediately. Your contamination will be addressed." "Contamination?" Thomas stepped forward, putting himself between Virith and Nixon. "What are you talking about?" Virith barely glanced at him. "The child has been exposed to your primitive species for 8 of your months. She has been polluted by your presence. She will require reconditioning. Her memories of this time will be removed. She will be restored to proper function." Thomas felt ice run through his veins. "You want to erase her memories? Of us? Of everything?" "Correct. She is heir to a noble house. She cannot be allowed to carry the taint of contact with lesser beings." Nixon grabbed Thomas's arm. "Father, they will make me forget. Mother, you, Danny, everything. They will make me into someone else. Someone who never knew you." Thomas looked into her copper eyes. He saw fear there, but also something else. Trust. She trusted him to protect her, just as her mother had trusted him 8 months ago. He turned back to Virith. She is not going anywhere she does not want to go. Virus soldiers raised their weapons. The air crackled with energy. Thomas knew he was outmatched. He had no weapons that could fight these creatures. He had no army, no allies. Nothing but his own 2 hands and the promise he had made to a dying mother. But he did not step aside. "You are brave for a primitive," Virus said. There was no admiration in his voice, only cold amusement. "But your courage is meaningless. The child belongs to the Dominion. She will be taken. If you resist, you will be destroyed. Your death will mean nothing." "Maybe," Thomas said, "but I made a promise. And where I come from, a promise means something." Virus raised his hand to signal his soldiers. "Stop." The voice was small but clear. Nixon stepped out from behind Thomas. She was trembling, but she stood tall. Her copper eyes were fixed on Virus. "By the right of voice," she said, speaking in her own language now, words the translator did not process for Thomas. "I speak as heir to House Thelsira, daughter of Ambassador Thelsira, keeper of the blood and the name and the honor. I invoke the sanctuary bond." Virus froze. Something flickered in his cold eyes. Surprise? Fear? "You cannot," he said. "I can. The law is clear. A child of noble blood, sheltered in time of crisis, may claim kinship with those who gave her refuge. I claim kinship with House Mercer of Earth. Thomas Mercer is my father by sanctuary bond. Daniel Mercer is my brother. Their blood is my blood. Their home is my home. To take me against my will is to violate the oldest laws of the Dominion." Virus' scales flushed dark with anger. "This is absurd. These creatures are not even sentient by our standards. They cannot hold noble bond. The law does not specify species," Nixon said. Her voice was stronger now. She was no longer trembling. "The law says only that the bond requires willing protection given and willing kinship accepted. Thomas Mercer protected me. He kept me safe. He healed me. He's my father in all ways that matter. The bond is valid." Virus turned to his soldiers. They looked uncertain. The law Nixon had invoked was ancient, almost forgotten, but it was still law. To break it would be to bring shame upon the entire Dominion. "This is not finished," Virus growled. "The Council will hear of this. Your precious bond will be challenged." "Let them challenge it," Nixon said. "Let them come to this farm and see what Thomas Mercer has done for me. Let them see the toy he rebuilt with his own hands. Let them see the grave where he buried my mother with honor and respect. Let them see the home he gave me when I had nothing. And then let them try to say the bond is not valid." Virus stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked back toward the beam of light. His soldiers followed. "We will return," he said over his shoulder. "And when we do, you will learn that the laws of primitives mean nothing to the Dominion." The light took them. The ship lifted into the sky and vanished beyond the clouds. The sun returned, warm and golden, as if nothing had happened. Nixon collapsed against Thomas. He caught her and held her tight. She was shaking again, all her courage spent. "Is it over?" Thomas asked. "No," Nixon whispered. "It is just beginning. But you stood for me, Father. You stood against them. No one has ever done that before." Thomas kissed the top of her head, right between her small horns. "I made a promise," he said. "And Mercers keep their promises." Down the road, the school bus was approaching. Danny was coming home. Thomas watched it come and wondered what the future would bring. But whatever came, he knew one thing for certain. Nixon was his daughter now. By law, by bond, by love. And no force in the universe would take her away. 15 years had passed since the night the sky caught fire over Kansas. The galactic Concord chamber was vast beyond human measure. Representatives from 100 species sat in tiered galleries that rose up into a darkness broken only by floating lights. The air hummed with translator fields, turning 1,000 languages into something each delegate could understand. This was the heart of galactic civilization, the place where the fate of worlds was decided then and today. They would decide the fate of Earth. Nixon Tausira Mercer stood at the central podium. She was tall now, fully grown, her violet scales polished and gleaming under the chamber lights. She wore robes that combined Karveth tradition with human touches, threads of Kansas wheat woven into the alien fabric. On the podium beside her sat the Shalveth, its blue LED eyes glowing softly, a patchwork of two worlds made whole. She was no longer the broken child who had crashed in a wheat field. She was Ambassador Tausira Mercer, first representative of Earth to the Galactic Concord, appointed by her own people and accepted by the humans she had come to love. The Karveth delegation sat in their gallery, Commander Virith at their head. He was ancient now, his scales faded to gray, but his copper eyes still burned with cold hatred. For 15 years, he had fought against Nixon's bond with the Mercers. For 15 years, he had tried to have her declared unfit, contaminated, unworthy of her noble name. For 15 years, he had failed. In the human delegation sat Danny Mercer. He was 22 now, a xenolinguist, one of the first humans to study alien languages professionally. He had spent his teenage years learning every tongue Nixon could teach him, preparing for this moment, for the day when humanity would finally take its place among the stars. Beside Danny sat Thomas Mercer. He was old now, his hair white, his hands worn from decades of farm work. But his eyes were still sharp, and his back was still straight. He wore a suit that did not quite fit, borrowed for the occasion, looking out of place among all these creatures from distant worlds. But he had earned his place here. Every delegate in the chamber knew his name. The human who had sheltered the dragon child. The farmer who had defied a warship with nothing but his word. The chamber fell silent as Nixon began to speak. "Honored delegates," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast room. "You have gathered today to vote on Earth's petition for associate membership in the Galactic Concord. Many of you have questions. Many of you have doubts. I stand before you to answer those questions and address those doubts." She paused, letting her copper eyes sweep across the assembled species. "You ask what humans are. I have heard the words used to describe them: primitive, violent, short-lived, dangerous. A species barely out of their caves, playing with nuclear fire, more likely to destroy themselves than reach the stars." Murmurs rippled through the galleries. The Karveth delegation nodded in approval. "You are not wrong," Nixon said. The murmurs grew louder. Confusion spread through the chamber. Humans are young. They have made terrible mistakes. They have waged wars against each other, damaged their own planet, built weapons capable of ending their civilization. All of this is true. I do not stand here to deny it. She placed her hand on the Shalveth, feeling its warmth against her scales. But let me tell you what else is true. Let me tell you what else humans are. The chamber fell silent again. 15 years ago, my mother's ship crashed on a primitive world. She was dying. I was broken. We had no allies, no resources, nothing but each other in those final moments. And then a human came. She looked at Thomas, her eyes bright with love. He did not know what we were. He did not know if we were dangerous. He only knew that we were hurt and afraid. So he came to help. He climbed into a burning ship and held my mother's hand as she died. He made her a promise to protect me. And then he kept that promise. Thomas's weathered face was wet with tears. He did not look away. When I was alone and grieving, unable to speak or eat or hope, his son sat with me in the dark and told me that damaged things merit attention. A 7-year-old human child looked at a broken alien girl and saw not a monster, not a burden, not a problem to be solved. He saw someone who needed love, and he gave it. Danny smiled at her, the same smile he had given her that night in the barn, sad and kind and real. When the Carveth came to take me, to erase my memories and remake me into something acceptable, a human farmer stood against a warship. He had no weapons that could threaten them. He had no allies who could save him. He had only his word and his courage and his love for a child who was not even his own species. She turned to face Commander Virith directly. You called them primitives. You said they were barely sentient. You said their promise meant nothing. She lifted the Shalveth high, letting its blue light shine across the chamber. But they rebuilt this. My mother's voice lives inside it still. Not because of alien technology. Because a farmer and his son refused to give up. They used tractor parts and radio wire and LED lights and love. They spent weeks working every night, failing and trying again, because a grieving child needed her mother's voice back. She set the Shalveth back on the podium. You ask what humans are? They are the species that sees something broken and does not throw it away. They mend. They heal. They adopt lost children and make them family. They stand against impossible odds, not because they can win, but because standing is right. Her voice rose, filling the chamber. They are fragile. Their lives are short. They make mistakes, but they love fiercely and forgive readily and hold on when all logic says to let go. They find strangers in burning wreckage and carry them home. They sit with weeping aliens in dark barns and share their own grief so that others will not grieve alone. She spread her arms wide. I am Nixon Thalsira Mercer. I am the heir to a Carveth noble house. I am the daughter of a Kansas farmer. I am proof that humans are worth knowing. I am proof that damaged things, given attention and love, can become something new and beautiful and strong. The chamber was utterly silent. 1,000 species watched, waiting. Vote as you will, Nixon said. But know this, humanity will rise. Whether you accept them today or in 100 years, they will rise. Because that is what they do. They fall and fail and break, and they rise again. And they lift others with them when they do. She looked at her family one last time. My father said damaged things merit attention. A little boy told that to a weeping dragon child with a shattered toy. And that is why I stand here today. That is why humanity will always rise. The vote that followed was not unanimous. The Carveth opposed it, as Nixon knew they would. But the majority carried. Earth was granted associate membership in the Galactic Concord. The first step toward full acceptance. The first step toward the stars. Afterward, Nixon found Thomas and Danny in a quiet hallway outside the chamber. They stood together, father and son and daughter, holding each other the way they had held each other 1,000 times before. I am proud of you, Thomas said. His voice was thick with emotion. Your mother would be proud too. Both your mothers. Nixon smiled. I learned from the best, she said. I learned from a farmer who kept his promises and a boy who knew that broken things deserve love. Danny laughed. I was 7. I did not know anything. You knew the most important thing, Nixon said. You knew how to be kind. The three of them walked out of the Concord building together. The alien sky was full of strange stars. Ships from 100 worlds sailed overhead, carrying beings Nixon had never imagined when she was a child on her mother's diplomatic vessel. But the stars that mattered most to her were the ones she could see from a certain wheat field in Kansas. The ones she had watched through the window of a guest room while she learned that love could come from the strangest places. The ones that had witnessed a promise made and a promise kept. Somewhere in the crowd, a young alien child stared at them with wonder. A species Nixon did not recognize, small and fragile looking, clearly far from home. Nixon stopped. She knelt down to the child's level and smiled. "Hello," she said gently. "Are you lost?" The child nodded, tears forming in eyes that glowed like tiny moons. Nixon held out her hand. "Then let us find your family together. And if we cannot find them, you can come with us. We have room. We always have room." Thomas watched his daughter help the frightened child. He smiled, remembering a night 15 years ago when he had carried a broken dragon girl out of a burning ship. Damaged things merit attention. The universe was vast and full of broken things. But as long as there were people willing to mend them, there was hope. There was always hope.